Hello and welcome to the next lesson in the Master the Elastic Stack series, all you need to get started with the Elastic Stack. In this video we're going to be talking about cluster monitoring and set up Filebeat and Metricbeat to monitor the different components of the Elastic Stack to have better visibility and troubleshoot more efficiently. After setting up a secure Elastic Stack, ingesting data into the stack, analyzing the data with Kibana, we need to keep an eye on the cluster and see how the stack is running and be proactive with any alerts. This is an overview of the learning objectives of the course. One important objective is to be able to implement monitoring of the Elastic cluster for better visibility. This is an illustration of what we have in the lab environment, a cluster with 3 Elasticsearch nodes, 1 Kibana instance, and 1 Logstash server ingesting data into the cluster. To start monitoring the cluster, we can use Filebeat and Metricbeat. These are data shippers that we can install on the nodes themselves and configure them to look at the logs and metrics on the nodes. In the demo, we're going to install Filebeat to monitor the logs of Elasticsearch and Metricbeat to monitor the metrics, things like the CPU, the memory, input, output, and we're going to monitor Logstash with Metricbeat to see the metrics and the stats of the data pipelines. And finally, we're going to set up monitoring for the Kibana instance. So we're here on Kibana. If we access the stack monitoring link from under the management tab in the menu, we get to this page, and by default it is monitoring our Elasticsearch nodes, and this is the self-monitoring feature that we enable the first time we access this page. If we click on enter setup mode, it will give us this little banner here that tells us we are now using self-monitoring, and if we click on this link, it will give us a banner telling us that we should be monitoring with Metricbeat, and under each of the nodes there's a link that we can follow, some steps that we can follow to install Metricbeat on each of the nodes and have them be monitored by Metricbeat. So we'll be doing that in the demo. We also have this card or widget here for the logs. Right now there's nothing showing up because we need to install Filebeat to be able to see the logs of the Elasticsearch nodes. So we'll be doing that after, and what we can see here is also widgets for Logstash and for beats. We can monitor those beats themselves, and more monitoring for the APM server and enterprise search. So if we click on this link here, it will open the Filebeat reference, and under modules here we have the Elasticsearch module. It tells us how to set up the module and what the module is about. So we will be editing this module. We'll enable Elasticsearch, and we are going to enable a file set that will look at the logs inside Elasticsearch. To start installing Filebeat, first we have to download and install the public signing key with this command. And after that, we're going to create a repository extension file in etc yum.repos, and I'll call it filebeat.repo. We'll paste in this content. It's from the Filebeat documentation. We'll save this file. All we need to do is run the command yum install Filebeat, and I'm going to select the release 8.14.3. And here's the version we're going to install. I'll just press yes, and it will download and install. And the installation is complete. Now we have to connect to the Elastic Stack by editing the filebeat.yaml file. Now after we finish installing Filebeat, we'll go to the configuration directory of Filebeat and we'll access the filebeat.yaml file, and this is the file we need to configure to set all the different settings for Filebeat and make it connect to Elasticsearch and to Kibana. The first setting here, we have to enable a Filebeat input. So the first one with the type file stream, we have to change this value to true to make it enabled. And then down to the setup.kibana section, we will specify the Kibana host with HTTPS and the IP address or the host name of Kibana with the port that Kibana listens on. And then a username and password. This username we will create in the Kibana graphical user interface and give this username the right privileges. And then we're going to use a certificate which I moved to the Filebeat directory, and this certificate is used previously with Kibana, since Kibana is an HTTP client talking to Elasticsearch on the HTTP layer. Filebeat also is an HTTP client that will talk with Elasticsearch on the HTTP layer. So we'll need to specify this file so that Elasticsearch trusts Filebeat. And then under the output.elasticsearch, this is how we connect Filebeat to the Elasticsearch cluster. We have Filebeat right now running inside the Elasticsearch node, but we will specify the Elasticsearch nodes so that Filebeat knows where to send the data. We'll just specify the IP addresses of the nodes, we'll specify the username and password, and then the certificate that Elasticsearch uses to trust the HTTP connection from Filebeat. We'll save this file. The next step is to start collecting the log data with the Filebeat modules. To look at the modules that we have, we can run the command Filebeat modules list. This is a list of all the modules that we have, and Elasticsearch is the one that we need to enable. To enable it, we can run the command Filebeat modules enable, and we name the module Elasticsearch. And now we have Elasticsearch enabled. Now we can go to the module itself under Filebeat modules Elasticsearch.yaml. And from here we must enable at least one file set in the module. So we're looking at module Elasticsearch, server. So we're going to enable the server logs. So we're going to set this to true, and we're going to set the paths. And we're going to be looking at, and these logs are usually here in the Elasticsearch log directory, and we're going to be looking at this JSON file. This is the cluster name that I have, elk series _ server. And now we need to set up the assets in Filebeat, because Filebeat comes with predefined assets for parsing and visualizing the data. We need to run this command Filebeat Setup. We can use the option -E to send the output to the console here. So this command will load the dashboards. So you can see here it's loading the dashboards in Kibana and other assets. And this takes a few seconds to a few minutes. And now here we see that it loaded the ingest pipelines and all the other assets and dashboards. If we clear the screen, now we can start Filebeat with the command service Filebeat start. And we can double check system control status Filebeat service, and we can see it's active and running. And now if we go back to the stack monitoring web page, we see under this card here, the logs are populated. If we click on the link and scroll down, we can start seeing the recent log entries from the Elasticsearch node in this nice format. We can see the timestamp, we can see the log level, is a warning or an error or an information, the type, and what the message is. And we can see here they are coming from node 1. We still have to add Filebeat to node 2 and 3. And we can see all of these logs, and even it takes you to this link here under observability, and you can look at the logs with this applied filter of your cluster UUID. And here you have more features. You can stream live these logs, and you can use things like highlights, and for example highlight all warnings or errors and see where they are mentioned or where they happen. And you can do some customization and change the time, of course. Now we are going to monitor the metrics of our Elasticsearch nodes with Metricbeat. And here, if we click on the enter setup mode, we notice our nodes here, they have this tag. They are being self-monitored. If we click on this link, it will tell us here on this banner, these Elasticsearch nodes are self-monitored. Click monitor with Metricbeat to migrate. So the recommendation is to monitor the nodes with Metricbeat. And if we click on Metricbeat on this link, it will give us some instructions. We can put the IP of the host, and then it will give us these instructions to start installing Metricbeat on each node. So we'll go back to the CLI and start installing Metricbeat. It's a similar process to installing Filebeat. We have the public signing key downloaded and installed, and we have a repository. So all I'm going to run is the command yum install Metricbeat, and I'm just going to specify the release 8.14.3. I will just double check the version here. We'll press Y and enter to start downloading and installing Metricbeat. And it is completed. We'll clear the screen. Now we will go to the configuration directory of Metricbeat and access Metricbeat YAML file and change the settings. This will be similar to what we did with Filebeat. And we'll specify username and password and the certificate that authenticates Metricbeat with Elasticsearch, because Metricbeat is also considered an HTTP client, sending data over the HTTP layer. And then we will set up the output.elasticsearch to specify the Elasticsearch nodes that Metricbeat will connect to. So we'll specify username and password and the same certificate file. We'll save this file. Now we'll check which modules we need to enable with the command Metricbeat modules list. And the one we need to enable is the Elasticsearch-xpack. So we'll use Metricbeat modules enable Elasticsearch-xpack, and now we have it enabled. If we list again, we have these two modules enabled. Now we'll go to the Metricbeat modules directory. We'll use the Elastic user. To authenticate to Elasticsearch, and this is the hosts that we're sending from, since Metricbeat is installed on Elasticsearch node itself. So So we're sending from localhost. So I'll keep it as localhost, or you can put the IP address of the host itself of Elasticsearch node 1 or whatever node you are working on. And then we're gonna add the SSL settings, and this will secure the HTTP layer between Metricbeat and Elasticsearch. We'll save this file, and I will copy this certificate file to the Metricbeat directory. We can run the Metricbeat test config command, and then we'll run Metricbeat Setup -e to set up the assets, the predefined assets for parsing and indexing and visualizing. And this will take a few seconds. You can see this is finished, loaded dashboards, and now we can start the Metricbeat service with the command service Metricbeat start. So I got some errors with the Metricbeat service when it's starting. So I came back here to the modules file for Elasticsearch XPack YAML, and I specified the IP address of the Elasticsearch node instead of localhost. So I'm going to start the service again. Now I also set up Metricbeat on node 2 and node 3, and this is me copying the certificate file to node 2 to the same directory and node 3. And now if we look at the stack monitoring page, we can see here a new banner that says Metricbeat is now monitoring your Elasticsearch nodes and disable self-monitoring to finish the migration. So if I click disable self-monitoring, and now it will say Metricbeat is monitoring all nodes. We can go to the node, to each individual node, and we have the metrics now being generated by Metricbeat. And we can go to the advanced tab and check more graphs to monitor the node. Now we have Filebeat and Metricbeat monitoring the logs and the metrics of our Elasticsearch nodes. Next is setting up monitoring for our Logstash instance with Metricbeat. From here on the stack monitoring page, we are still on the setup mode. We can see here we have the Logstash widgets or cards, and we notice that there are no nodes that are being monitored. To monitor the Logstash instance, we're gonna install Metricbeat on the Logstash instance, and we will be able to see the nodes here and look at the metrics, the CPU usage, and the pipeline metrics through that Logstash instance. So here on a Logstash instance, mine is called ingest, we are going to first disable the default collection of Logstash monitoring metrics. And to do that, we're going to etc logstash and then the logstash YAML file. And there is a setting that's called monitoring.enabled. We have to set it to false. And I'm just going to enter that setting right here, monitoring.enabled is false. I'll save this file. And now we're going to be installing Metricbeat and set up its settings and enable the right modules to start monitoring Logstash. I'll clear the screen. First we have to download and install the public signing key with this command, and then we're going to create a repository. So I'll create one. I have created one for Logstash. I call it logstash.repo. We'll paste in the following content, and then we will run the command yum install Metricbeat, and I'm going to use the same release as my Elasticsearch. so that I can keep all of the components the same release. And after we install Metricbeat, we'll go to the Metricbeat YAML file to configure the settings so that Metricbeat connects to Elasticsearch to send the data to Elasticsearch. Metricbeat YAML. And from here, under Setup Kibana, we have the host, the IP address or the host name of Kibana instance with the port. And then under the output.elasticsearch, we will enter in the list here the nodes, the IP addresses of the nodes or the host names, and then the username and password to connect to Elasticsearch. And then this certificate file, I moved it to the etc Metricbeat directory so that Metricbeat can authenticate with Elasticsearch. This is all from the Metricbeat YAML file. Now we have to enable the Logstash module in Metricbeat, and we can list the modules here. And the one we need is, I already enabled it, Logstash-xback, and we enable it with the command Metricbeat modules enable Logstash-xback. Mine is already enabled, so we'll go to that module. And from here, we're going to make sure this is enabled or set to true. The hosts is our Logstash instance, since Metricbeat is monitoring Logstash, so it will connect to Logstash on this port. So we have to open this port on the local firewall, and we can put localhost or the IP address. I'll keep it as localhost for now. And we're going to use a username and password to authenticate with Logstash. And under security and users here, we will create this user and give it the remote monitoring collector built-in role. And under metric sets, we'll leave node and node stats specified for the best results for complete visualizations, and we'll enable SSL, and we'll specify this certificate file under etc Metricbeat. We'll save this file, and then we will start the Metricbeat service with the command service Metricbeat start. And to check the status of Metricbeat, we'll run the command system control status Metricbeat, and we see it active and running, and we don't have any errors here. So we'll go back to our Elastic Stack monitoring page, and under Logstash here we see we have one node being monitored. From the main screen here we have these three cards. We can see the events received and events emitted from Logstash, the number of nodes, the uptime, the JVM heap, and how many pipelines are running through that Logstash instance. If we click on the node, we can see the name of the node, the CPU usage, the load, the events ingested, and we can click on the node itself and we have more graphs. We can see the events received rate, events emitted, CPU, system load, but we are not able to click on pipelines and advanced. Maybe because we didn't open the port 9600 on the Logstash instance. We're going to open that on the local firewall of the Logstash instance and see if that solves it. So if we go back here and we run firewall command --list all, and we don't have that port open, so we're going to run the command firewall add port 9600 TCP permanent. we'll do a reload. And if we hit the up arrow key and list, now we have 9600 TCP is open. And if we go back to the stack monitoring page for the Logstash node, now click on it, and now we can see the pipelines, a tab, and the advanced tab. On the pipelines tab, we can see the main pipeline, the default one that I have, and it tells you how many events per second are being emitted or ingested. You can go to the pipeline, it shows you the input plugin, how many events per input and how many events per every filter, and the events per second of the output plugin, which is our Elasticsearch cluster. And now on the main monitoring page, we have monitoring configured for our Elasticsearch nodes and for our Logstash instance. Now for the last part, we're going to enable monitoring on Kibana for the Kibana instance itself. Now the recommended approach is to use an Elastic agent or Metricbeat, but the Elastic agent is not set up yet. I have to set up a fleet server and the agents, and that's for a future video. And with Metricbeat, it's recommended to send the metrics to a monitoring cluster. But in this demo, I'm just going to enable self-monitoring on Kibana. With self-monitoring, we have a couple of settings that should be set. On every Elasticsearch nodes, there is a setting in the Elasticsearch YAML file that we can change or set, or we can go here to the dev tools, and the setting is called the XPack monitoring collection enabled. We can send this API request, get cluster settings, to make sure this setting is set to true. So it's the XPack monitoring collection enabled. If it's not set to true, we can send this request, put cluster settings, and set it to true. And then on the Kibana server, if we go to the Kibana YAML file, there are a couple of settings that we need to include on here. So the monitoring enabled, and then the monitoring Kibana collection enabled, also set to true. We're going to save this file, and we're going to restart the Kibana service. And after the Kibana service restart, on the stack monitoring page, we can see now Kibana here displayed, and we can enter to the overview here and look at the client requests and the client response time. You can see some metrics here, and we can see the status of the instance, the memory used, how many requests and how many connections, and other data. And if we click on the link here for the server name, we have more graphs to look at, like the memory and the HTTP connections and system load and others. And with that, we have completed our demos. We have Metricbeat monitoring our Elasticsearch nodes, Filebeat monitoring our logs from the nodes. We have self-monitoring of our Kibana instance, and we have Metricbeat as well, monitoring the Logstash instance. In this demo, we talked about and configured cluster monitoring with Filebeat and Metricbeat on different components of the Elastic Stack. In the next video, we're going to be performing some administrative tasks on the cluster. Stay tuned, and I will see you in the next one.